Let's go live to Perth. I'm joined by the Shadow Employment Minister, Liberal Senator Michaelia Cash. I want to ask you about the fact that Cabinet's meeting for the first time in Port Hedland, in your state of WA, big focus on the West. But let me start with the superannuation question, Michaelia Cash. Is the government within its rights to at least have this debate around the sustainability of the superannuation system?
Well, in response to a question, the Prime Minister said, "We make no apologies." What I say to the Prime Minister is this: perhaps you need to start making apologies to the Australian people for breaking what was a very, very clear election commitment that Australians relied on. Kieran, your show has run time and time again today. The very clear question both the Prime Minister and the now Treasurer were asked before the election: will you be making any changes to superannuation? And their response was clear: no. For the Prime Minister to stand there today and now say, my government makes no apologies, well, quite frankly, he is breaking a promise to all Australians, and he should be apologising to them, because this is just code from the Prime Minister for we're coming after your money with potentially higher taxes. So, Kieran, they are breaking a promise. It's there, quite frankly, in black and white prior to the election.
The Prime Minister did say, though, today we haven't made any announcements at all. They're simply talking about the forecast, the costs of super concessions, as the Treasurer pointed out, to overtake the cost of the age pension by 2050. Is that, again, I put it to you, if they do it in May, maybe in the upcoming budget, that's a clear broken promise. But if they were to do it after the next election, do they have political cover?
Let's be very clear. The questions that were asked of this Prime Minister prior to the election: will you be making any changes to superannuation? Not only did he say no, Kieran, he then went on to say, our policies are out there for all to see. So in answer to your question, in this term of government, any changes made to superannuation, in particular, when they talk sustainability, you know what that's code for, going after your money and higher taxes, this is a clear, broken promise. But Kieran, the Prime Minister now is breaking so many promises to Australians. This is now becoming a pattern of behaviour. Mr Albanese, in trying to win the election, which he did win, made certain promises to the Australian people. I'll reduce your energy bill by $275. Well, guess what? They cannot even utter the number 275. We'll tackle interest rates. You've now seen interest rates rise over 8 times. We'll tackle inflation. It's now at, Kieran, a 30-year high. So this is a Prime Minister who, day after day, what Australians are now seeing. He'll say one thing before the election to get your vote, but once he has been voted into office, quite frankly, he is not interested in honouring his commitments, so he should be apologising to all Australians.
He's been meeting with Indigenous elders in WA, other community groups in Port Hedland ahead of the Cabinet meeting. The opposition leader was in the town of Laverton yesterday, and Leonora, I believe, had dinner with a number of Indigenous elders himself. What was the key feedback? Was it all about the issue of the cashless debit card? Is there support for that being made voluntary late last year?
Short answer to your question, yes and yes. But what we saw, Kieran, yesterday was, quite frankly, a contrast in leadership styles. The Prime Minister flies into WA and just keeps on telling everybody, I promised I'd come here 10 times, I've been here 9 times. He seems to think that that's enough for Western Australians to believe he's doing something for our state. What did Peter Dutton do? He flew into Western Australia. He spent the morning with myself and Senator Matt O'Sullivan on the ground here in Perth, talking to people who are doing it tough about the issues that matter to them. And then, unlike Mr Albanese, he flew directly to Laverton and then to Leonora and met with elders and councillors on the ground. And last night you saw a real contrast. Mr Albanese in Perth at Royal Freshwater Bay with some of Perth's elite. Well, do you know where Peter was? He was at the Leonora Central Hotel having a counter meal with the elders, with the councillors, and listening to the issues that they want Mr Albanese to come and address them on, and he refuses to. So
And
yes,
do they want the
it is all
cashless
about
debit
the cashless
card?
debit card.
And they want it back? They want it back and compulsory?
They would like that. Whether or not they get that is another thing, and under this government the answer is no. But what Peter heard yesterday is this. He spoke to shop owners, Kieran. They were able to give Peter direct evidence that since the abolition, the Albanese government abolished the cashless debit card, the people transitioned off, and 98% have now transitioned off, and the cash came directly back into the community. The shop owners were saying to Peter, we can now tell you there's less meat being sold, there's less vegetables being sold, but what is walking out the door is the grog. The rivers of grog are now flowing. Peter saw it, Kieran, with his own 2 eyes. He met with people who are now being subjected to domestic violence. He saw the kids who were actually getting fed under us now wandering the streets with no food. This is a direct failure of Labor government policy, and shame on the Prime Minister for swanning into Western Australia, lauding the fact that you've been here 9 times, but failing to actually front to the places that you needed to listen to in Laverton and Leonora. And instead, yes, he's in Port Hedland, but guess what? Today, he stood with Premier McGowan and he re-announced $565 million that, Kieran, the former coalition had committed to already in our final budget. So all you saw today was a re-announcement of money and commitment that the former coalition government, backed in by the WA Liberal team, had already made.
It is the first time a federal cabinet has met in Port Hedland, though, and the government argues it's showing that while it did well electorally in Perth, it knows that WA is more than just Perth, and that Port Hedland is a key engine room of the WA economy. That's a message that will go down well, I would have thought, with many in WA, won't it?
Well, in the first instance, what I'd say is, you told us they were actually going to be in Port Hedland for 2 days. They're not. The big announcement that you made had already been committed to by the former coalition government. So this is a re-announcement of funding that we had already committed to in our final budget. You were pleaded with by those in the goldfields who wanted you to come and see firsthand on the ground what your policy itself was doing. This is a direct failure of Albanese government policy. He refuses to go there. It's not about how many times you come to WA, Kieran. It's about the policies that you implement and whether or not you're listening to the people on the ground. And on that point, the Prime Minister's failing.
Liberal Senator and frontbencher Michaelia Cash, appreciate your time as always. Talk to you soon.
Great to be with you, Kieran.